Welcome to the next video in this series. In this video we're actually going to get a sprite up on the screen for the first time. But before we do that, I want to do a little bit of cleanup work up here. What I want to do is I want to come in here and create a new empty game object, and I'm going to name this level. Now the reason I'm creating this is I want to parent both of the walls and all three of the floors to this empty object. And all that it is doing is it's giving us one transform, so I can move everything all together at one time, or no, I can move it, I can rotate it, I can do anything I want with it. But the other advantage is it just allows me to collapse it and get it all out of the way. It's just something really simple, just to keep it nice and tidy. Let's see. Oh, that's pretty much all I want to do with that. The next thing that we need to do is actually get a sprite on the screen. Now, the first way I'm going to do it is the way you can do it that's built into Unity without using any of the additional scripts that we put in here. All this sprite manager stuff. We're going to skip that for now. We're just going to do it natively with Unity. To do that, we're going to come up here and we're going to create another game object. This time though, instead of creating an empty one, we're actually going to create a plane. So that's going to bring our plane in, which is going to come in at some arbitrary location. So we want to zero it out. And you'll also notice that it is facing straight up in the y direction, or its local z. So to fix that, we can rotate by either -90 or 270. Both yield the same result, and it will. So I'm just going to go with 270 to keep it in positive numbers. You'll also notice that this is an awfully big sprite, and our basketballs were kind of small, and we don't really want a basketball this big. So luckily, the numbers work out that if we reduce all the scales by 1/10 to 0.1, we get just the right size. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to move it up a little bit so it's not stuck in the center. And from here, we have our sprite. Well, it's not really a sprite, it's actually a mesh, just a plane, but we're going to turn it into a sprite. So to turn it into a sprite, we need to add a texture. So we're going to create well, actually I'm not going to create it, I'm going to drag and drop it. So what you need to do is go out and find yourself a nice image of anything you want to turn into a sprite, and copy it, and then just drag and drop it in. You can also right click and hit import new asset, but I just drag and drop it, and mine happens to be a basketball. So that's my texture that I'm going to use for my sprite. Now to apply it to our plane, we need another material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new material, and this material I'm going to name it ball mat for ball material, and then I'm going to drag the basketball texture into our texture. And then from here, I'm going to take our ball material and I'm going to drag it and drop it on our plane. So now we've got our ball, but it looks kind of funky and it's not exactly right. Reason why is the shader that we're using is diffuse, and again it's looking for a light, which we don't have. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to particles and we're going to change it to an alpha blended texture. So with the alpha blending and it being a particle, it doesn't need any light, and it detects the alpha that I added from using a image editing program like Photoshop. So now I have an alpha basketball even though it's a plane. So now this is our sprite. It's not a true sprite in the tradition of the sense where you're drawing directly onto the final image. We're actually rendering a texture via material onto a plane, and that plane is being manipulated in 3D geometry. So technically, if you really want to get down to it, everything we've done here, even though it's a 2D game and it looks like we're using sprites, it is still truly 3D. We're just fooling the system and making the believer think that it's a 2D sprite-driven game. So it's a gray area, and we're definitely kind of graying the borders, as it were. But it does work. So what you end up with now looks like a basketball. But let me save this real quick just in case Unity wants to crash again. And if we hit play, notice it doesn't do anything. It just kind of sits there. Well, the reason why is we haven't set up any physics on our plane. So we're going to go up here, and I'm actually going to rename the plane, and I'm going to name it ball. So now we've got it, and you notice it does have a collider, but it's a plane collider, and that's not really going to work for us because it's a ball. But to show you what I mean, I'm going to leave it for now. But we're going to come in here and we're going to add another component, physics, and we're going to make it a rigid body. So now what we've got is we've got a rigid body applied to our basketball, and I'm going to set its mass to 10. It's going to use gravity, so now our ball should fall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it up a little bit and come over here, save again just in case, and then hit play, and our ball bounces. But notice it didn't do anything. It just kind of fell through, didn't interact with anything. So to do that, let's go through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ball up here, click on the right thing, and I'm going to get rid of our mesh collider, and I'm going to remove that. I'm going to come up the component, I'm going to come to physics, and I'm going to add a sphere collider. Now if I zoom in here, you can see that our sphere for our sphere collider lines up almost perfectly with our ball. Close enough that in this type of game you'll never notice the difference. So we're going to leave it that way. So I'm going to save it again and hit play. And now that we've got a sphere collider, it actually interacts with our plane, or with our cubes that we've turned into floor surfaces. So that's what I wanted to show with that. So now we've got it interacting. Now, one of the things that you've noticed is it didn't really bounce. It just kind of fell and stuck and rolled. Now, if you want to make it bounce, we need to add another material. The material that we need to add, though, instead of being a regular material, is actually a physics material. So a physics material just basically defines how it's going to relate, or how this sprite is going to react physically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this as a bouncy mat for a bouncy material, and I'm going to come up here to its bounciness, and I'm going to set it to 1. Now 0 means no bounciness, 1 means maximum bounciness. So just by setting this to 1, and I come over here, save again, and hit play. Oops, notice just because I made a bouncy material, it isn't applied yet because I didn't apply it to the sphere collider. So I need to take this, drag and drop it to the material for the collider. This is how you define how this collider is going to react when it hits another surface. So now when I run this, we should get a nice bouncy basketball. So now you notice indeed our basketball is bouncing. But you may notice that the quality of our texture isn't as good as it could be. So let's look at that right now. So we can go into basketball, We can come in here and look, and it's going up. Well, it's using mip-maps because it's 2D, and we're not going to have stuff way off in the distance and stuff really close to the camera. We can get rid of mip-maps. And let's set this to trilinear filtering to get a little bit better filtering on it. So we hit apply. I'm going to save it again, run. Now you can see we've got a much crisper looking basketball. And it is rolling and bouncing. Now, if you remember, we're not even using the sprite the sprite manager yet. This is all done with just a plane modifying its collider to be a sphere and adding a bouncing material to it. So if we're looking at the stats, we can see that we've got 6 draw calls. So we've got 1 for each one of the cubes plus 1 for the basketball. And what I'm going to be showing you in the upcoming videos is what happens when we take this basketball and we're going to turn it into a prefab, and then from there we're going to make multiple copies of it. And then once we've got that going, you'll see how that acts with the draw calls and how it will increase the number of draw calls which can cause a problem when you're developing on the iPhone. So with that, that is all I wanted to show you in this video. And in the next video, we will go and turn this into a prefab and get multiples of them on the screen at once. See you then.